Gaming currently has a huge swords and sandals problem. There were 13 Swords and Sandals games shown across the recent Big 4 showcases: State of Play, Summer Games Fest, Nintendo Direct, and the Xbox Showcase. And that's without counting other fantasy games that kind of blur the lines. It seems like every showcase we get 5 of these games that are nearly indistinguishable from one another. When I say Swords and Sandals, I don't mean literally every game with a sword. And I'm not saying they all play the same way either. I mean third-person, melee-focused, fantasy, or historical action games that occupy a very similar visual tone and look to them, that often echo some of the same tropes, like the government mandated snow level you always get, just so they can contrast the blood against the snow. Let me show you something. Here are 3 of these games side by side. Different studios from different publishers. Do they really look all that different? People are clearly tired of getting so many of these games. So I was here thinking, but why so many? Was it always like this and I just never happened to notice? It can't be. So my initial thought was, this could just be simple development economics. Mid-budget studios iterating on these established pipelines and assets from previous games more quickly than a team building entirely new worlds and systems from scratch, allowing for these games to be pumped out at a faster rate than anything else around it, causing this level of saturation. And whilst I do think that's part of it, I actually think one game in particular is to blame: Elden Ring. Whilst Dark Souls and Demon Souls clearly made the template, Elden Ring was an entirely different cultural moment on a completely different scale, selling over 25 million copies, winning 2022 Game of the Year,
Elden Ring!
receiving insane amounts of mainstream press coverage, and millions of people who had never played a Souls game finally crossing over. And I think that's actually where it started. I mean, if you think about it, this wins 2022 Game of the Year, sells all those copies, and when we get all of this data is what, 2023? These games are quicker to produce, so a 3 to 4 year dev cycle puts us at 2026, 2027, meaning these games are only now showcase ready. I think it makes perfect sense why we're receiving so many of these now. Elden Ring didn't only inspire these games aesthetically, it proved that a Swords and Sandals game can be produced for a relatively low cost and still have mass appeal. I don't think it's a creativity problem. I think this is trend chasing and risk adverse decision making becoming the default as development costs have ballooned. I want to be clear about something before we go further. I don't necessarily think that these are bad games. Some of them are truly great. I just played the Way of the Sword demo, and I'll be honest, this one I didn't really like. But Blood Message looks incredible. One of the best things shown out of everything at all of these showcases. When making this video, I learned about Mortal Shell 2, another game that looks great, and I'm absolutely going to pick that up now. These are now some of my most anticipated games. So this isn't all the way about quality, although I do think these games rarely climb above being a 7 out of 10, and are quite often very middle of the road with only a handful of exceptions. But it's more about what we're not getting, because of what we keep getting over and over and the saturation that comes with it. I recently reviewed 007 First Light, and what made that game so special was the modern time period and all of the different locations that it took place in. A London nightclub, a resort in Vietnam. It felt like a breath of fresh air. And what's crazy to think about is back during the PS3 era, we were getting so many of these sorts of games that the only reason we didn't get that same fatigue back then that we have now for Swords and Sandals is that we had it for first-person shooters instead. The catalyst for that one being how popular Call of Duty was at the time. But now it feels like we get far fewer major, grounded, modern-day third-person action games than we ever used to. The only 2 that come to mind are Saints Row 2022 and Watch Dogs Legion in 2020. Saints Row being so bad that it killed the entire studio behind it, and Watch Dogs Legion was so poorly received that they're reportedly going back to fix it 6 years later. So it's not like the other options we do have are heavy hitters, and that's what made 007 feel extra special. A well-made samurai game is still a well-made samurai game. The problem is the ratio. Even if every single one of those games were great, I'd still think we were getting too many of them. When 10 to 12 of your biggest announcements across 4 major showcases all occupy the same aesthetic corner of the same genre, it blurs together and makes these showcases feel so much more predictable, knowing you're always going to see your government mandated sword and sandals game. I remember watching showcases and not knowing what I was about to see. Something could come from anywhere, a completely new setting, a fresh idea. But now, with development cycles taking so long, this constant stream of remakes and remasters, and these risk-adverse publishers only making sequels, everything feels either samey or predictable now. And when your baseline is already predictable, another wave of indistinguishable swords and sandals games doesn't help. So where does this leave us? This is a system that's working exactly as designed. A pipeline full of games publishers thought made complete sense to greenlight in 2022, and an audience that's already tired of them. There's obviously no immediate solution to that, and I'm not sure there will be one anytime soon, because that requires the industry taking financial risk that it's currently not incentivized to take. Not to say that all is lost. There were some amazing reveals at these past showcases. Crossfire, a terrible name for a game, but one of the most interesting things I saw revealed. A military game we probably would have had fatigue for in the 360 era, but today stands out in the current climate. Star Wars Zero Company, an XCOM style of game, 2 themes we've definitely gotten before, but never combined. Cuphead 2, a game so far out we didn't even get a glimpse of it, but it's bound to be unique. And a handful of remakes. I know the general consensus is we're tired of these 2, but if they have shorter dev time, can be varied, and could be that intermediate gap we get in between releases, then I'm fine with that. I'll be picking up Resident Evil, Veronica, Tomb Raider, Wolf Among Us, Assassin's Creed Black Flag, and Rayman, and maybe that makes me part of a whole separate problem. And don't get me wrong, there's definitely a place for swords and sandals video games, and they have their own audience. I'd just like to see more risk being taken if you're going to make this sort of game. Make it stand out somehow, because I don't think developers suddenly forgot how to be creative. I think there's a myriad of people who have genuinely strange and specific and new ideas that just haven't been greenlit yet, because the numbers don't support them yet. And that's the pattern that worries me. We know how fast trends move on. Shooters replace platformers, Battle Royale replace shooters, and at some point, the swords and sandals will be replaced by whatever works next. But this isn't 2008, 2013, where development cycles take 2 to 3 years. I don't understand why publishers continue to trend chase in today's climate, thinking that a trend will stick around for the 5 to 6 years it can take to develop a game, when historically, that's never been the case. Now more than ever, you need to be trying to predict the future of the industry rather than looking at what's currently in season. But I think the fact that you watch this video, the fact I see comments and tweets everywhere echoing the same sentiment, means that a conversation is at least being had. And these conversations can hopefully shift the future type of games we receive. Or maybe we'll be having this exact conversation at next year's showcases. I honestly wouldn't rule it out. It takes too long to turn the ship around at this point, but maybe one day. Either way, I'll be watching. Let me know if you agree, or maybe you want 10 samurai games a year. Thank you for listening, for watching. Consider liking the video or subscribing if you aren't already, and I'll see you in the next one.